She sits at the defense table like someone who's been promised this is the day everything finally goes her way. Her back is straight, her shoulders are relaxed. Every so often she tucks a loose strand of hair behind her ear, not with panic, but with the calm of a young woman who's been told over and over, "You're going home after this." Her attorney has spent months building that confidence. He's told her the judge will see her as they do. A college student with no record, pushed into a fight she didn't want, backing up again and again while an ex-friend came at her. The video helps their story. On the screen, you can count the steps as she moves away across the parking lot. One slap, one wild swing, one knife, one girl on the ground. To her side of the courtroom, it feels like the law might still decide she was just trying to survive. Then the prosecutor stands. He doesn't replay the footage. He reaches for printouts. Not from a camera, but from her phone. Messages she sent long before that night, when she thought only her friends would ever read them. Promises about what she'd do if that girl showed up again. Threats that sound a lot like what actually happened outside that Columbus smoke shop. In a few sentences, the quiet, composed young woman at the table has to share the room with the version of herself that lives in those texts. What you're about to see is the turning point, the instant the state's case takes shape. The point where screenshots start carrying more weight than the story of a scared teenager. On March 27, 2023, 17-year-old Halia Culbertson died from a single stab wound to the neck, and the trail of what really led to that moment was already written out in her former friend's own words. This is the story of two one-time best friends whose tension didn't cool down, it boiled over. One ending up in a grave, the other in front of a judge insisting she was only defending herself. If you've never heard this case before, prepare yourself, because what happened outside 161 Carryout on that spring night will test what you think you know about teenage fights, self-defense, and how fast one insult, one challenge, can explode into a killing. Before she became a name in a headline, Halia Culbertson was just a Columbus kid with a big smile and a loud laugh her friends say you could pick out in any room. Family and friends describe her as the most loving and outgoing person, someone who cared for all close to her and was loved by all of us dearly. At 17, she was at the in-between stage of life, still figuring out adulthood, talking about what came next. Her loved ones say she dreamed about a future in nursing, the kind of career built around helping people. Her grandmother told the court that Halia hadn't even begun to understand what she had to offer this world, that her family never got the chance to see where her talents and love for life would take her. At home, she was a daughter and a sister. Her mum describes waking up now to a constant ache in her chest, a knot in her stomach that never loosens. A close family friend told the judge that when Halia died, it felt like part of my soul, or all of it, left. Her sister put it more bluntly. Someone who was supposed to be my sister's best friend killed her and left her to bleed out. When the judge later called Halia Forever 17, it wasn't poetic. It was a simple, terrible fact. The life her family had been watching unfold, step by step, birthdays, holidays, school, plans for nursing, just stopped in a parking lot outside a smoke shop. On paper, Bryanna Barozzini looked like a lot of young women in central Ohio. She grew up in the Columbus suburbs, graduated from Westerville North High School, and was a student at Columbus State Community College at the time of the stabbing. She lived at home with her mother and stepfather. She had no prior criminal record. In early coverage, her attorney stressed those details. A college student, not a gang member, a kid with a future, not someone already living on the margins. Friends and family, like many families in these cases, described her as a basically good person who got caught in a bad situation. But prosecutors and Halia's family point to another side of Bryanna, a young woman caught up in an intense, bitter feud with her former best friend. In their view, she wasn't just a scared kid that night. She was someone who had sent violent threats, who let resentment harden into something far more dangerous. Those angry text messages promising to slice Halia's throat and cut that bay, if she showed up at her house, revealed a level of hostility that didn't fit the image of a quiet, conflict-averse college student. Both versions are real. The honor roll graduate. The young woman describing how she would cut another girl on my whole family. Understanding this case means sitting with both images at once. Bryanna and Halia weren't strangers drawn into a random altercation. They were, as multiple outlets and family members have said, former best friends. Years before the courtroom and the headlines, they were in each other's circles, hanging out, sharing jokes, knowing each other's secrets. They moved in the same social spaces around Columbus, part of the same teenage world of group chats, mutual friends, and late-night runs to places just like 161 Carryout. At some point, that closeness cracked. By early 2023, prosecutors say the two young women were in the middle of an ongoing feud. There had been arguments, confrontations, and crucially, threats. In one text message, Bryanna wrote that she would slice Halia's throat if she came near her again. In another, she promised to cut that BA on my whole family if she tries showing up to my family's home again. Those messages suggest more than just teenage name-calling. They hint at a conflict that had spilled out of social media and phone screens and into the real world, visits to homes, fears about showing up uninvited, a sense that the next encounter might not just be words. From the outside, it can be easy to dismiss teenage drama as just that, drama. But for the people actually inside those group chats and confrontations, the emotions are very real. By March 2023, whatever friendship once existed between Bryanna and Halia had turned into something ugly, personal, and volatile. Sunday, March 26, 2023 started, for most people in Columbus, like any other late March day. There is no indication from public records that either girl set out that morning planning to change the course of two families' lives. What we do know is that late that night, around 11:48 p.m., Halia was at 161 Carryout, a smoke shop and convenience store in the 5600 block of Emporium Square with a few friends. They were hanging out, the way teenagers do, at a place that sold snacks, lottery tickets, and tobacco products. A familiar late-night stop in that part of town. At some point close to midnight, Bryanna arrived at the same store with a man. In a city of nearly 1 million people, they could have gone an entire lifetime without crossing paths again. Instead, they walked into the same small building at almost the same moment. Inside the shop, according to prosecutors, Halia saw Bryanna and immediately began yelling, challenging her to a fight. The feud that had been smoldering in text messages and earlier confrontations was suddenly face-to-face again, no screen in between. Store staff asked them to stop or leave. Halia went outside first. She didn't walk away. She waited, just outside the door, in the parking lot, ready for Bryanna to come out. The night that had started like any other Sunday was now ticking toward a point of no return. When Bryanna finally walked out of 161 Carryout, the cameras were already rolling. Surveillance video and later courtroom descriptions paint the outline of what happened next. Outside, in the glow of parking lot lights, Halia closed the distance between them. She had already challenged Bryanna to a fight inside. Now, witnesses say, she kept pushing, demanding a fistfight, moving toward her, her voice raised. Bryanna's lawyers would later say she backed away, telling Halia she didn't want to fight. Prosecutors, reviewing the same footage, didn't dispute that she took steps back after being confronted. The defense pointed to those steps as proof that she was trying to retreat, not to brawl in the middle of a parking lot. But backing up isn't the same as walking away. The argument didn't end. Voices stayed raised. Teenagers in the area watched, some filming, some yelling. This is the part of the story that feels chillingly familiar. A crowd, a phone, two angry young people. Then came the moment that both sides agree escalated everything. Halia slapped Bryanna in the face. It was open-handed but hard. The impact snaps a head to the side on camera. The crowd reacts. This is where, in so many fights, the video ends with more fists, maybe someone stepping in between them. Instead, in that instant after the slap, between anger and decision, Bryanna reached for something in her hand or pocket. The weapon that night was a knife. Exactly when Bryanna first had it in her hand isn't fully clear from public reporting, but prosecutors say that after being slapped, she took out a knife and stabbed Halia once in the neck. It wasn't a prolonged attack. There was no flurry of blows, no multiple stab wounds. It was one single strike, just below the clavicle, cutting into the neck and severing critical vessels. That is often all it takes. According to a defense memo later summarized in news coverage, Halia kept coming for a moment, still swinging, not realizing right away that she'd been stabbed. It was only when she saw the blood, on her clothes, on her hands, that the reality of what had just happened started to set in. Around them, the mood flipped from adrenaline to shock. Some people yelled, others stepped back. At least one person called for help. And Bryanna, police and prosecutors say she left. She didn't stay with Halia, she didn't wait for officers. She walked away from the parking lot, from the crowd, from the girl she had just stabbed. In the span of a few seconds, a teenage fistfight had turned into a homicide scene. At 11:48 p.m., Columbus police received the call, a stabbing in the 5600 block of Emporium Square. On the other end of the line, you can imagine the sound that dispatchers across the country know too well. Overlapping voices, someone trying to answer questions, someone else shouting in the background that she's bleeding. Officers arrived to find Halia on the pavement, suffering from a severe wound. Paramedics worked quickly, pressure on the injury, assessing breathing, loading her into an ambulance. She was transported in critical condition to Ohio Health Riverside Medical Center. Despite those efforts, the damage was too extensive. In the early minutes of March 27th, at 12:24 a.m., doctors pronounced 17-year-old Halia Culbertson dead. Back in the waiting area and at home, family members began to get the calls no parent, sibling, or grandparent ever wants to receive. One of Halia's close friends would later tell the judge that since that night, every holiday has felt wrong, knowing that Halia never got another birthday, or Christmas, or Thanksgiving, that she would be forever 17. On scene, detectives quickly learned this wasn't a mystery involving a masked stranger. Witnesses were able to identify the suspect by name, Bryanna Barozzini, 18 years old. Surveillance cameras from 161 carry-out captured much of the argument and the stabbing. Officers also knew where to look for her. Within hours, Columbus police went to the suburban home in Westerville where Bryanna lived with her mother and stepfather. There, investigators say they found details that would later loom large in court. The clothes Bryanna had been wearing that night, in the washing machine. A knife hidden in a crawl space, which prosecutors say was the weapon used to stab Halia. To law enforcement, those weren't just household details. They looked like evidence that someone knew something terrible had happened and was trying to clean up after it. Bryanna was taken into custody. In early reports, police said she admitted swinging the knife during the fight, but maintained she had been defending herself. Any full interrogation video has not been released in detail, but we know the basic arc that plays out in countless interview rooms. Detectives explain what they've seen on video, what witnesses have said, what the medical examiner has found. At some point, they tell her that Halia is dead. What may have felt in the chaotic minutes right after the fight, like "I stabbed her but she'll be fine," becomes "You're under arrest for murder." Within days, 18-year-old Bryanna Barozzini was formally charged with murder in the death of 17-year-old Halia Culbertson. In court on March 28th, she appeared in a jail jumpsuit, standing beside her attorney as the judge read the charges. The judge set bond at $750,000, a number acknowledging both the seriousness of the charge and the fact that she was not an unknown transient, but a local student with family support. The conditions were strict. No contact with Halia's family, no return to the scene at Emporium Square, no weapons of any kind. Her family posted bond, and Bryanna was released to await trial at home. For Halia's loved ones, that decision was a bitter pill. Their daughter was buried, while the young woman accused of killing her was able, for more than a year, to sleep in her own bed, attend classes, eat dinner with her parents, always under the shadow of a potential life sentence, but free. The case moved slowly, as serious cases do, with motions, hearings, and negotiations. Meanwhile, two families in the same metro area lived very different versions of the same story. One grieving a loss that would never change, the other bracing for a verdict that could change everything. By June 2024, the case was finally approaching trial. A Franklin County jury, reporters noted, was expected to decide whether Bryanna had fatally stabbed Halia in self-defense, or whether this was a criminal act of unjustified violence. The defense case centered on three main points: Halia as the aggressor, Prosecutors themselves acknowledged that Halia challenged Bryanna to a fistfight inside the store, waited outside, and slapped her in the face. Retreat and fear. A defense sentencing memo described Bryanna backing away repeatedly, telling Halia she didn't want to fight. Video shown in court reportedly captured her stepping back after being hit. Her lawyer told the judge she didn't want to engage at all. She was afraid. Youth and clean record. They emphasized that she was a college student with no criminal history, not someone prone to violence, arguing that she reacted out of fear, not malice. The prosecution's case focused on a different set of facts. Excessive force. Even if Halia started the fight, they argued, responding to a slap with a knife to the neck was wildly disproportionate, especially when Bryanna could have kept walking away. After-the-fact behavior. Leaving the scene, putting her clothes in the washing machine, and hiding the knife in a crawl space, prosecutors said, did not look like the actions of someone who believed she had simply defended herself. They looked like attempts to conceal evidence, prior threats, and then there were the texts, the ones we heard at the beginning of this story. Weeks before the stabbing, Bryanna had written about slicing Halia's throat and cutting her on my whole family. Those messages, the state argued, undercut any suggestion that this was a panicked, unforeseeable reaction. They made it look more like the explosion everyone should have seen coming. A crucial legal moment came when the judge indicated he would allow those text messages into evidence at trial. According to coverage, he said they could be seen as incriminating and damaging to the self-defense claim. Once those threats were officially in play, the stakes changed for both sides. A jury would not just see a scared girl stepping back from a slap. They would hear her earlier words about what she'd do if this day ever came. On June 10, 2024, the day before opening statements were set to begin, everyone showed up to court expecting a trial on a manslaughter charge. The original murder count had been dropped that morning. But by the end of the day, there would be no trial at all, facing the risk of a long prison sentence if a jury rejected her self-defense claim. Bryanna Barozzini agreed to a plea deal. She stood in court and pleaded guilty to one count of involuntary manslaughter in Halia's death. The maximum penalty under Ohio law for that charge, as applied in this case, was 3 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. For prosecutors, the plea guaranteed a felony conviction and prison time, avoiding the uncertainty of a jury trial where self-defense arguments and video footage can hit different jurors in different ways. For the defense, it meant avoiding the possibility, however small or large they evaluated it, of a verdict that could have meant decades behind bars. The court accepted the plea. The fight now moved to the next, emotionally charged stage. Sentencing, July 11, 2024. The courtroom is full. Family members on both sides sit in the same small space, separated by an aisle and a reality that will never fully make sense to either of them. Prosecutors ask the judge for the maximum sentence, 3 years behind bars. They describe a teenage fight that turned into a killing, fueled not by survival, but by anger, backed up by threats, and followed by efforts to hide the weapon and wash away the evidence. They remind the court that Halia is gone forever, while Bryanna will eventually walk back out of prison. The defense argues for leniency, even probation. They speak of a young woman who panicked, who has shown remorse, who has spent more than a year under court restrictions, and whose life, they say, is already permanently altered by what happened in that parking lot. Then come the voices that matter most to many viewers of cases like this. The victim impact statements. Halia's grandmother, Catherine Langley, speaks about a life cut short. She was only 17. She hadn't even begun to understand what she had to offer this world. Her mother, Haley Culbertson, talks about daily grief. The pain of losing a child is indescribable. It's a constant ache in my heart and knot in my stomach that never loosens. A close family friend, Mackenzie Adrian, tells the judge that Halia never got another birthday or Christmas or Thanksgiving, while Bryanna spent the year after the killing at home, free on bond. She's forever 17, Mackenzie says. Halia's sister, Kaylin, asks how someone who was supposed to be her sister's friend could be so cruel and so vicious, describing the killing as a betrayal that will shadow her family for the rest of their lives. Then it's Bryanna's turn. Standing at the table in her blue sweater, she speaks quietly into the microphone. Not a day goes by that this incident hasn't been on my mind. I understand and feel for the victim's family as I know the harm I have caused. I will be living with this guilt the rest of my life. Judge Mark Serrott listens, then announces the sentence. 3 years in prison, the maximum allowed under the plea, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. For Halia's family, those numbers land like a second blow. Her mother calls it a betrayal of her daughter's memory, a sentence that feels impossibly small measured against the rest of Halia's life. For Bryanna's family, it is both a mercy and a loss. They watch deputies lead her away to begin serving time immediately. 2 young women walked into that carryout a year earlier. Now, one is gone forever, and the other walks out of a courtroom in handcuffs. When you strip away the legal language, the headlines, and even the video clips, this case comes down to a handful of seconds in a parking lot. Seconds that turned a long-running feud between 2 former best friends into a homicide. On one side is Halia, a teenager with a big personality and real flaws, who pushed for a fight she didn't need to have, who hit first, and who will never get another chance to grow past that moment. On the other side is Bryanna, a young woman with no record, who felt threatened, who did back away, but who also carried a knife, sent violent threats, and chose to meet a slap with a blade to the neck. As we step back from that Franklin County courtroom, it's easy to tell yourself this story is far away, that it belongs to other people, in another city, with problems you or your kids don't have. But if you strip away the names and the exact location, what's left feels uncomfortably familiar. 2 teenagers in the same social circles, a falling out that moves from whispers to arguments, threats in text messages that everybody tells themselves are just talk, and a place like a corner store or a smoke shop that becomes the stage for something no one can undo. When you look closely at what happened between Bryanna and Halia, there's a pattern that shows up in a lot of cases like this. It doesn't start with a weapon, it starts with words. It starts with, "I'll be there," "Pull up," "You won't do anything." It escalates into threats you say because you're angry, or embarrassed, or trying to impress people on the other side of a screen. "I'll cut her," "I'll hurt him if he ever comes near me again." In most lives, those messages stay buried in old chats and never see daylight. In this case, they were printed, stapled, and entered into evidence. The law doesn't just look at the last blow. It looks at the build-up. When Bryanna's old messages came into view, they reframed everything that happened in that parking lot. Was she scared? Probably yes. Most people are scared in a fight. But the text showed a history of anger, of promises about violence that landed just a little too close to what happened on March 26th. And then there's the idea of self-defense itself. A lot of people have a picture in their heads from TV and movies. If someone swings at you, if someone threatens you, you can do whatever it takes and the law will be on your side. The reality is messier. In most states, including Ohio, self-defense has limits. The law asks, did you start the fight or did you escalate it? Did you have a way to walk away? Was the force you used reasonable compared to the threat? In this case, even the state admitted that Halia was the one who pushed for the fight, that she hit first. But the moment a knife came out and went into the side of her neck, the question became,
hey, if you touch my sister, I'm about to put my phone down, bro.
Or was that a disproportionate response?
Get it over with, bro.
The plea to involuntary manslaughter says the system landed somewhere in the middle.
What you're about to
Bryanna
see is
wasn't
the
treated
moment
like someone who
prosecutors
planned
built
an
their
ambush,
case, the moment
but she
the evidence
also wasn't
began
treated
speaking
like
louder
someone
than
who
the
simply
claims
blocked
of
a punch.
self-defense, not for
For
months
parents
but for
watching
years.
this, the fear is obvious. It's not just that your child could be the one attacked. It's that your child could be the one who makes the bad decision, the one who takes a weapon just in case, the one who sends threats in a text because they're angry and doesn't understand those words might one day stand next to them in court, read out loud with their full name attached. For teenagers and young adults, there's another layer. A lot of fights feel, in the moment, like they're about reputation, respect, or not backing down. But a reputation doesn't comfort a grieving mother. Respect doesn't resurrect someone declared dead at 12:24 a.m. on a hospital monitor. None of the people in that parking lot, not the girls, not the crowd, woke up that morning expecting their names to be tied forever to a homicide case. In the end, this story is not about perfect victims or perfect defendants. It's about ordinary people who were loved, who were flawed, who made choices in seconds that will echo for decades. Halia will always be forever 17. Her photos will never age. Her family will keep setting an extra place at holidays in their minds, even if the chair stays empty. Bryanna will eventually walk out of prison. She will be older. Her record will follow her. And no matter what she does with the rest of her life, there will always be a line in her story that reads, "She killed someone she once called a best friend." If you're watching this and you have a teenager in your life, or you are one, this case is a hard reminder of how thin the line can be between a bad night and a life-altering crime. A line between standing up for yourself and crossing into something you can't take back. If stories like this help you look at those lines a little more carefully, in your own life, in your family, in your community, and you want to follow more real cases where law, fear, and split-second choices collide, you can stay with us, subscribe, and be here for the next episode.